Okay, everyone. This is truly a very special occasion because I think we're celebrating 150 years of a most remarkable man and his teachings, which are as true today as they were 100 years ago. And I do believe that these teachings, if we follow them with our own truth, will continue to be the same perhaps in another 100 years' time. So I think the celebration of his life, of the man himself, but particularly I think, because he was a humble man, he would want us to celebrate truth, the light of truth, which is in each one of us, and to continue that message throughout our lives. So, HTH, here's to you and to a further 100 years.
Thank you, Astra. My great pleasure now then to introduce my colleague, James Ashby. James has been on the Trust Board slightly longer than me, I think if I remember rightly. James has this wonderful depth of insight into the esoteric aspects of Christianity, and he's going to share them with us now, I think. So over to James Ashby. Thank you.
Hamblin taught Aquarian Christianity. Now that may sound a little bit odd, a little bit far-fetched. You might not even begin to know what I mean. So I'm going to explain that first. To me, HTH teaching was the true Christianity and is the Christianity for the Aquarian age, which, as you may know, is now. This is the spirituality for the planet for the next at least 2,000 years. So what is Aquarius? So Aquarius is a constellation, one of the 12 signs of the zodiac. Now you may or may not know that the Earth spinning round, the South Pole and the North Pole, has a slight wobble on the North Pole. And it takes 26,000 years to complete a full circle of that wobble. A mere 26,000 years. And in doing so, it points to the 12 different signs of the zodiac. So when Moses came down from the mountain and found that his friends had made a golden calf, he was appalled because they were coming out of the age of Taurus, the bull, into the age of Aries, the lamb or the ram. Of course, the signs of the zodiac aren't exactly positioned at equal distances from each other. So if you take 26,000 years and divide it by the 12 signs of the zodiac, each sign has influence for about 2,167 years, depending on the exact spacing between the different signs. So we're now transiting from Pisces to Aquarius. But Jesus saw out the age of the ram or the lamb, the age of Aries. He was the lamb who went to the slaughter. He was the herald of the age of Pisces, the fishes. And in the design for the Pisces, you have two fishes swimming in opposite directions. He had fishermen as his first disciples. The fish was a sign of the early church. And you may notice many cars now have little fishes on the back, indicating that the driver is a born-again Christian and a fundamentalist perhaps, somebody who is really keen on the teaching of religion as it has been for the last 2,000 years. But we're coming out of the age of Pisces. The attributes of Pisces are compassion, particularly, concern for others, and on the opposite side, they can be didactic, expecting others to do as they are told to, expecting others to be under their power in the worst forms. The attributes of Aquarius, into which we are now entering, are quite different. They are great communicators. They are independent and self-sufficient. They honour other people for what they are. They don't push their own opinions. They're very happy to discuss and talk about all aspects of each other's philosophies, but there's no pushing. There's honouring. And they don't expect other people to take on their own truths. Because people's truths can be very different, depending on what stage they are in life, depending on what stage they are in their own personal development. Jesus foretold the age of Aquarius. Towards the end of his ministry, when they were going into Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, he said to one or two of his disciples, "Go ahead into the city. You will find a man carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him. He will lead you to an upper room. There, make ready the feast." Well, practical instruction. But read into the background of that. Jesus knew that the man carrying a pitcher of water is the sign of the age of Aquarius, which isn't going to happen for another 2,000 years. He's saying, when you come to the man carrying a pitcher of water, follow him. He will lead you to an upper room. He will take you to a higher level of consciousness. This is where the planet is now. We are transiting from Pisces into this Aquarius, which is going to send a higher level of consciousness potential to everybody. It's going to be a wonderful world to live in, because we're not going to be having wars. They are pointless, and people will understand that. There's going to be honouring others for what they are, even if they think differently from us. A number of cultures think that the actual change took place in 2012, but it takes possibly 100 or 200 years to really transit from one sign to another. So you start seeing the attributes of the new sign before the old sign is finished. And it only struck me this afternoon that 100 years ago, Henry Thomas Hamblin started his work. This is the beginning of the influence of the Age of Aquarius coming to Western culture. There are all sorts of other signs of influence of Aquarius coming to us. We had the phone. That's been there for quite a long time. Then all of a sudden, we had fax. But that happened so quickly that it's almost out of date now. We have the internet. It's all communication, isn't it? We have Skype. Amazing communication. We can have conferences with different people in different parts of the world all at the same time. This is all Aquarian attributes. But also, we have growing concern for the planet, particularly amongst the younger generation. Look at that wonderful girl from Sweden and what she has been doing. And here, our new owners are really interested in teaching young people about honouring the planet, about honouring wildlife. We had a wonderful program the other night on TV about the wisdom of animals, about the intelligence of animals, about how animals have sympathy for each other. And it's something that we never considered before, or many people haven't, but it's going to become absolutely normal to be considerate to other people, to be considerate to other animals, to be considerate to other life. Because the great teaching behind what Jesus said was that the divine is a part of all life, all creation. A part of all creation. This is actually Druid teaching. And he may well have learned that when he came to Britain, which he almost certainly did. In the Gospel of Thomas, he says, "Split the stone, and I am there. Cleave the wood, and you will find me there." So we're seeing the last playing out of the age of Pisces. Those who are pushing the old ideas, those who wish to dominate others, who expect, because they are didactic themselves, expect others to do what they're told. So we have Putin, we have President Xi, we have the Ayatollah. There's no way they can win. There's no way their influence can continue for very long. Because the whole of the planet is changing in its attitude, in the subconscious of everybody. Because what Jesus taught was that the divine is within all things, within all people, within all creation. And if the divine is within all creation, then as the divine moves, so people move. As we move out of this difficult area of wars, of power hunger, of expecting others to do what they say, and we move into respect for each other, these people can't last. There's no way that Putin can win in his war at the moment. Now on to Henry Thomas Hamblin, who I think taught a much deeper form of Christianity than you will normally hear from a pulpit. I'm not decrying the teaching that the Church has given. It's perfectly valid. And maybe for the last 2,000 years, it's what, for most of the time, people have needed. They've needed the lead as they've developed inwardly. So they needed to see Jesus as a sort of master figure, as the only Son of God. But Jesus never claimed to be the only Son of God. Henry Thomas Hamblin had three particular interests or teachings which I think make all the difference to life. The first is his encouragement for us to continue searching. Searching to find out who we really are deep inside. The second is keeping an alignment with the divine. And that doesn't just mean going to church on Sunday, of course it doesn't. It means being aware of the divine within oneself, whatever one is facing in the material world, in the normal life. And the third thing is the power of thought, which is something that humanity hasn't practiced very much. Aborigines practice it, but we're so stuck on language and description through language and communication of language that we are quite unaware of our own power of thought. In his searching, HTH said, "In the course of time, I began to understand what I really wanted. What I was seeking was not anything of this world, but only to know God and experience his peace." In the Gospel of Thomas, which was discovered in 1945, buried in the sands of Nag Hammadi in Egypt, and it was one of the Gospels banned in the very early years of Christianity because it was out of what the Roman Empire wanted. In the Gospel of Thomas, he says the seeker should not stop seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will be concerned, he will be troubled. Then he will be astonished, he will marvel. And then he will come to rule over all. And what he means by that is he will come to rule over everything to do with himself, with his own life, with his ambitions, with his projections, with his communication with other people. Everything will start falling into place, and he will realize his life's purpose. So searching is so important that all the time we can search. Because when you do a jigsaw puzzle, it's great, isn't it? You do a bit here, green trees, and a bit here, blue lake, and a bit here, sand, and you start putting it all together, and you start beginning to see the picture. It takes a long time to see the whole picture. And it's only when we put the whole thing together that we get a completely different idea of what it's all about. It's not just about sea, it's not just about sand, it's not just about blue lakes or blue sky. There's a ship sailing on an outward tide in the evening light, or whatever. As far as alignment is concerned, HTH says seeking through logic and thinking puts a lid on our intuitive faculties. Intuition comes to the spirit. Alignment not only with God out there, but with God within. And that is our prime mover. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says, if flesh came into being from the Spirit, that was marvellous. If spirit came into being from the flesh, that would be a marvel of marvels. I see quite a sense of humour there, because of course spirit came first. Quantum physicists have now come to the conclusion, by analysing matter down to its very beginnings, its constituent parts, it is only waves of energy. There's nothing concrete, there's nothing solid. It only coalesces into matter if spirit requires it to. That's science. Modern scientists say that. Spirit comes first, matter comes afterwards. So we talk of ourselves as being body, mind and spirit. We are spirit, mind and body. Very much in that order. So if we ignore the spirit, we can't make progress. In other words, spirit is our ruler. And in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says, one who knows everything else but does not know himself knows nothing. when you give rise to that which is in you, what you have will save you. And he also says, if you look for the kingdom of heaven in the sky, the birds will get there before you. If you look for the kingdom of heaven in the sea, the fishes will get there first. I tell you, the kingdom of heaven is within you, and it is outside you. It is all around you. As to the power of thought, which is this most important thing that Hamblin taught, and which brought him huge success in life, he built up this chain of opticians taking huge financial risks, and his friends thought he was crazy. But because he envisioned what he was going to achieve, and because he relied on his most inner self to guide him, he knew that he was in line with the divine. He was keeping that alignment. And so he could use the power of thought. And he built up that business until he realized that money making was taking too much of his time, and he needed to come here to do his other sort of vision work. There's a fascinating book called Mind Reach, and it's by, I think, the two Americans, Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff. And they tested hundreds of people to see how many people could usefully practice telepathy, actually send messages to other people at a distance. So what they did was, there were 3 people in each experiment. So one was a sitter who sat in a darkened room, semi-darkened room, one was a recorder who sat beside him, and one was a traveller who was sent off to some distant destination that the sitter knew nothing about, the recorder knew nothing about, and then at a given time, the traveller would send a telepathic message to the sitter. They found that nobody whom they tested was incapable of practicing telepathy. Nobody. They found that one guy could actually transmit what he read in a file to the sitter, several miles away. And the chap could say, he just read it out, and the recorder recorded it. That's what's in the file. Our powers of thought are extraordinary. My wife and I had an amazing experience when we were spending a week on the island of Iona, which we used to visit once a year for a house party, discussing psychology and spirituality and Jungian dream therapy. But one year, one of our usual attendees couldn't come because her son had been in a very nasty road accident and was in hospital on a life support machine. And during our meeting one day, we had a phone call from the mother who said, "Can you please be with us? The hospital have given up on the life of my son, and they're going to turn off his life support machine. Can you please be with us while this happens?" So we stopped immediately what we were doing. We walked into St. Oran's Chapel, which is the oldest chapel on Iona. It was originally built in the time of St. Columba. It's a tiny chapel, not much bigger than, just about the size of this room actually. And we all went into the chapel. Nothing organised. Some people chanted, some people prayed, some people hummed, some people just expressed the Om. But we were all focused on this young man and his life support machine being switched off. And after about 20 minutes or half an hour, we went back and we carried on with our course. And we didn't know what happened. It was about 4 weeks later that I was talking to one of the people who'd been there, and he said, "Isn't it amazing about that young man?" I said, "What? Haven't you heard?" He said, "No. While we were in St. Lawrence Chapel, they switched off the life support machine and he started recovering. He's now so much better that he's out of hospital and he's planning to get a job." That is our power of thought. That is your power of thought. Jesus taught on more than one level of understanding at once. He spoke in Aramaic, and that language is a very simple language. It suggests facts and ideas, suggests. The listener is invited to consider what is said, not to take it as read. English comes from over 5 different languages. We have ancient British, the Celtic language. We have Latin. We have Greek. We have German. We have French. And probably some others as well. Plenty of Scandinavian, of course. But we've got such a vocabulary from all these different languages that we can be very precise on what we mean because we pick the right word to say what we mean. In Aramaic, there's a word Shem, and that means name, it means atmosphere, it means light or sound. Ask anything in my name, it shall be given you. Ask anything in my atmosphere, it shall be given you. Ask anything in my light, it shall be given you. The only trouble is that in Aramaic, there is no word for me or mine, it is of I. So ask anything in the light of I. And the other trouble is that in Aramaic and Hebrew, the verb to be is not expressed, it's understood. So, ani ha derek in Hebrew, ani I, ha, the, derek, way or direction, is I am the way. I, the way. I am, it's the way. Well, I am. Somewhere in here is I am. When Moses was on the mountain and asked God at the burning bush what his name was, he said, I am that I am. But if that was in Hebrew or Aramaic, it is I, that I. So, the I am is the divine within. And if when you read the Bible, you remember that, and you remember that there is no me or my, but it's all to do with I and I am, all of a sudden, Christianity is in sync with Buddhism, the Muslim faith, Indian faiths, because so many other cultures recognize the divine within, which we have been steered clear of because Rome took over the church. And when the church was formed, by the Bishop of Lyon in about, I think it was about 160 AD. They started bringing people together to belong to the church. But anybody who didn't accept the teaching at its plainest, most down-to-earth level was excluded. It had to be a church focused on Jesus as a third party outside that. I and my Father are one meant that Jesus and his Father was one, but nobody else is. That isn't what he taught. No one shall come to the Father except by me. No one shall come to the Father except by I am, the divine within him. I am the bread of life. You can get three meanings out of that. Jesus is the best example that we know. So he says, I am the bread of life, and we think, fine, all you've got to do is be a fundamentalist Christian, you're there. But it isn't necessarily what he was saying. He said that on one level. On another level, he was saying, I am is the bread of life. I am is the bread of life. So the bread of life is the divine deep within us. But bread in Aramaic, lachmo, is very, very similar to the word for insight, lachmo. So he knew that some of his hearers would understand what he was saying is, I am is the insight to life. The insight to life is deep within you. So, HTH was really, to me, the herald of the Age of Aquarius to the Western world. His teaching was absolutely in line with the understanding of Jesus' teachings as we follow the man carrying a pitcher of water up into that upper room. So we must continue the searching as we put together life's jigsaw puzzle and find how close we are to the divine both within us and around us. And the closer we become aligned to the divine, the more fun life becomes. Jesus had a great sense of humour, and I use a prayer which asks for me to remember the joy, but also the laughter of life in our alignment with the divine. So, remember what Hamblin achieved from poor beginnings to healing our eyes, to showing us the new vision for the new age, for the next 2,000 years, and the glorious place that Earth is going to become when we respect all that is around us and when we see the divine in everything around us, whether or not that everything recognises itself. I mean, it doesn't matter if we have somebody who's being really difficult with us, he may not have got it yet. So don't blame him, honour him for what he is. And Hamblin, of course, landed up becoming known as the Saint of Sussex. I think he's the saint of the Western world.
Yes.